So thank you everyone for joining us for EVs Made Easy, brought to you by Clean Energy Nillumbik, by Nillumbik Shire, Nillumbik, the Greenwood Shire, and Sustainable House Day presented by Renew. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I'd like to acknowledge we're on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. This land was not ceded and its history never really told, but that's changing, and we are part of that change. So, just wanted to explain that we're a co-production of, as you can see on the screen, Clean Energy Nillumbik, the Council, and Sustainable House Day. Clean Energy Nillumbik is a local group of volunteers who are here to try and accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And they don't just do webinars, they do a range of different events. And I'm going to explain one now, which is the Expert Eco Chats. That's happening Sunday the 1st of June at 2 to 4 in the afternoon at Edendale Farm here in Eltham. These are free 20-minute appointments with experts of your choice. This is like speed dating, except information on solar, as you can see, batteries, rebates, heat pumps and hot water, getting off gas, sustainable design, all the things you will need, and your questions will be answered by experts. So that's a really fantastic initiative on behalf of Clean Energy Nillumbik and all the experts, including Bryce Gaton himself, who will also be there. Just some quick housekeeping. I'll ask that you keep your audio and your camera off. Otherwise, we're going to have a range of people all talking at the same time. And we are going to have a Q&A after Bryce does his presentation. So I will keep track of the chats, but I'll ask you to try and keep your questions to that time. Make a note of some ideas. Bryce may probably answer questions that you have as we go, but if he doesn't, keep a note of that. And if you need to, you can type it into the chat and then I will go back and make sure that I follow up with those questions. We should be done and dusted by 8:30. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing and I am going to basically hand over to Bryce to begin his presentation. So Bryce, I handed the Zoom to you.
Good. I just managed to unmute myself. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that lovely introduction. And hopefully I'll be able to answer as many questions as I possibly can through the presentation. As Jeff said, best to keep your questions to the end in the webinar format. It's very hard to answer on the way through. So if you can keep them to the end, jot them down or pop them in the chat. We'll do our best in the panel session at the Q&A at the end to answer any questions you need. Now, actually, I'll do a quick share of the screen. Here we go. Share that. Here we are. So, Jeff, is that showing nicely?
Yes, indeed. Perfect.
Beautiful. Okay. As people may guess, as I get into the presentation, I come from a teaching background. So these slides are basically designed as a sort of revision material after the presentation rather than a sort of a normal PowerPoint presentation. So a lot of the information I'm giving, I'll also put in writing in the slides, as well as adding a bit around it with the talks. So I'll cover off in the topics of what is an EV, look at the transition here and around the world, talk a bit about EV charging and how that works and how that differs from actually owning a petrol car, talk about the Australian policy and the state of play there, including maybe the battery rebate that'll be coming and how that'll affect the EV vehicle to grid sort of stuff, or vice versa, and then look at choosing EVs and what's on the market, what's coming, and where to find reliable information, both about the EVs coming to market and how to charge and other sources. Also, if you want a copy of these slides, email me at evnews@bigpond.com. I'll also put that email address at the end. So if you don't make it written down before this presentation starts, I'll also put it up on the final slide. So I'll get into it. Today, I'm going to talk about what is an EV, and there are actually 4 different types of EV that we've begun to become used to. The first 2 I'm going to talk about are the plug-in EV, the PEV, and the main one that I'm going to be talking about tonight is the BEV, the battery electric vehicle, and they're the simplest of all of them because they have an electric motor driven by a fairly sizable battery, and as you slow down, I've basically put a little extra space for regenerative braking. That means as you slow down, the motor turns into a generator, and the effort of producing electricity gives you a braking effect, quite strong braking. So you slow down and put some of the energy back into the battery. And all EVs do that to a greater or lesser degree in terms of their battery size. The key point is that regenerative braking will not only save you between 5 and 20% of your electrical energy that you put in to get in the car up to speed in the first place. It will also save heaps on your brake pads and rotors, so you don't replace the brake pads and rotors anywhere near as often as you would in a conventional internal combustion engine or ICE car. As you'll see under the PHEV, the ICE, it means internal combustion engine, and their days were when batteries are super expensive. As I'll talk about a bit later, batteries back around 2011-12 cost about $1,200 US per kilowatt hour. So an average car with sort of 50 to 80 kilowatt hours of battery, you do the maths. These days, they're getting down around $110, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But at an order of magnitude less, the use case for the PHEV and having a small battery and a petrol or diesel motor to take you further is becoming smaller and smaller in terms of its use case. Anyway, they do have a place still, and they also use that regenerative braking, but combine it with a smaller battery because the battery in those days was a lot cheaper. The sad part about PHEVs was they were designed in some ways as a compliance car in Europe. So they began with quite reasonable electric only ranges of 80, 70 kilometers, even the BMW i3 had something around 200. But becoming compliance cars, some of them got down 3 or 4 years ago to maybe 12 kilometer range, but they got all the incentives and green benefits of the full battery electric vehicle when it effectively could give you very little distance on the battery. They've changed the regulations now, and actually they're getting back up around 50 to 70 and 80 kilometers again. The next line along, better go the other way. A hybrid electric vehicle, that was the early ones like the Prius and the Camrys that are around now. They don't have a plug, as you may see there. They only refuel by petrol or diesel. The key point is if they run out of their fossil fuel, they stop, whereas a plug-in hybrid will run until its battery expires or runs flat. So they might get you that 50, 80 kilometers. And a full battery will get you these days anything from 400 to 650 kilometers, depending on the size battery and its efficiency. So another key point with hybrid electric vehicles is the bans that are coming in overseas over the various coming years. They're included as a petrol car because they are basically a fuel-saving device, not a full battery electric car. So they are included in the bans. When they run out of petrol, they stop. So they're counted as a petrol car, not as a electric car. But the PHEVs are included in the cars that keep being sold after the petrol car bans. And the last car I'll mention, mainly because it's become a zombie, basically because it's a dead person walking, but it doesn't know it's dead yet. The fuel cell EV, alternative name, the hydrogen car. The reason I say it's a zombie is there's probably 8 or 10 refueling stations, not all of which are open to the public here in Australia, versus the number of power points and EV chargers around Australia. As you can guess, it's very hard to refuel the fuel cell EV. And the hydrogen that's made for them takes 3 to 5 times as much electricity to produce the hydrogen as it does just to charge the car in the first place. So unfortunately, don't tell the hydrogen car manufacturers, but there aren't any actually left now. The hydrogen car manufacturers have basically been giving up on them. Some are working on hydrogen trucks, but as I'll talk about a bit later, they too are being overtaken by the batteries. Tonight, though, I'll be talking about these two, the plug-in vehicles, because they are the ones that will be included or going past the bans. And in particular, we talk about the BEV because a plug-in hybrid pretty much will recharge off a power point. It doesn't need the higher power charges that a BEV commonly uses. And next slide, as I said, the hybrids are fading out with the bans and the zombie has disappeared. And the PHEV use case has diminished. So the battery electric vehicle, 5 or 10 years' time, will be the only one coming around. I do like this slide. This is a 1906, I think it's a Pope electric vehicle. And this lady done up to the very best clothing, showing off her latest in EV chargers with the super safe bare copper buzz bar knife switch. EV chargers, by the way, have improved somewhat since then. And you can see that car is right at the beginning of the automotive era because it uses a tiller steering, as pre-steering wheel days. However, I talk about mainly in EVs or battery electric vehicles, the BEVs, but it's coming in all forms. The electric trucks are coming, and there's a number of electric trucks becoming sold in Australia. Photon, in fact, just announced yesterday, or Photon Mobility, have announced they're bringing in an 8.5 and a 18-ton truck, in addition to their 4.5 and 6-ton range already here, and are also test running a 32 or 38, I think it was 32-ton concrete cement truck. As those two showing there, the Tesla truck is now been on sale for 12, 18 months in America. Can't be sold here because the regulations, it's just a bit too big. That Scania truck is actually for sale here at the moment, and they're making, that one's got about 300 kilometre range, and there's a 500 kilometre range just starting to be produced in England that'll be arriving here at some stage. The next one I'll be talking about is machinery. Yes, mining machinery is going electric underground. It's vastly safer and better than carrying fossil fuels as well as all the fumes. So they're actually starting to come about. And even electric bobcat, there's a small version of one now available here in Australia. Tractors will be coming. There are actually electric tractors available, and I believe next year the first of them will be turning up here in Australia. This one, bicycles and scooters. Yes, who hasn't tried to be run over by an electric delivery bicycle? Pretty much all the delivery bicycles are electric these days, and it seems like every second ordinary bicycle is electric now, as well as all the scooters zooming around the CBD in Melbourne, as well as the scooter hire systems. Yes, their motorbikes are available, and that is in fact a Harley-Davidson Livewire. They've spun that out as a separate business now, but that is built by Harley-Davidson, has been around 3 or 4 years, I think now. Planes, yes, they do exist. There's a small fleet of flight trainers. That little blue one, or the one against the blue sky there, is actually some flight trainers here in Melbourne, I believe. And that other bigger one there is called the Alice, and is going through flight trials at the moment for registration to sell as basically a short hop, what do you call it, a executive jet replacement, a 9-seater, 2-pilot. Yes, flying cars from the Jetsons will become available sometime soon. That one is called a Black Fly. It's been available for 12, 18 months now in America. You can look that up on the web. It's a vertical takeoff and landing single-person vehicle. Ultimately, they hope it will be a fully autonomous, so you dial it up on your app, and it will land at a suitable designated spot in a vertical form, and then it will take off vertically and then swings its wings across and propels itself along at about 100 kilometres an hour with about 100 kilometre range. Ultimately, they hope that to be an autonomous vehicle, as I said, and you just dial it up an app. But at the moment, it is a single pilot vehicle. Autonomous cars, we keep hearing about them, and I wouldn't believe the hype that Elon Musk probably promotes about them being available in the next 6 to 12 months. My guess in the last Renew article is sort of 10 to 15 years before we see any major rollout of autonomous vehicles for us to hop in or buy. But that one is actually built here in Victoria. It's overseas at the moment, being trialled. Autonomous electric vehicles, AEV, out in kind of Croydon area of the builders of that one. Electric buses, if you're driving around Melbourne, you'll be following electric bus quite often these days. Also, one of the big cities in China swapped their entire fleet of buses to 10,000 electric buses, and I'll let you in on a secret, it didn't bring the grid down, and massive improvement in the fumes and noise and just general ride quality. Yes, electric ferries do exist. That one's been around for 6 or 8 years now, and it does a regular run between some Scandinavian countries. It's about a 4 megawatt hour battery. It is being followed up by many more of them. And in fact, Incat have just built, down in Tasmania, have just built a large electric ferry that's going over to Brazil. That Ampere one that's showing there has several hundred passengers and quite a large number of car capacity. So they're more than just a small little ferry. General equipment, that little ride-on mower there is built by Ecotech. Councils are buying them and similar ones because they love them, because they are very quiet, so they don't annoy people, so they can start a bit earlier, and the neighbours are quite happy. And they also just recharge overnight off a 15-amp power point. And believe it or not, yes, electric boats are a thing. You can buy conversion kits for outboard motors, and that one showing there is an electric Maserati boat for sale in Europe for sort of things like Lake Como and up in Italy and that sort of area. So very much a status symbol, but yes, electric boats are also coming. And there are a number of suppliers here in Australia for those conversion kits, as well as in Melbourne on the Yarra, there's the little electric go-boat picnic boats. Having done that about 18 months ago as a work do, they're a lot of fun. I do like this slide, so I'm happy to sort of swipe it from various other people who've used it. As you can see there, back in 1900, you can see one horseless carriage. And in this very affluent area of America, it didn't take all that long for everyone to start buying their horseless carriages. And by 1913, all you can see is the swish of one horse's tail, and the rest are all the horse or the horseless carriages. So these transitions can happen quite quickly, as we've all been used to. In fact, we have seen everything from, depending on how old we are, from colour TVs, microwaves, the mobile phone, even electric power. All of those things follow a particular curve, start off slowly as the techie people sort of get hold of them and play with them. Then you'll end up with the early adopters that see these new technologies and quite like the idea. Then you get the early majority that go, yep, the technology's arrived. We'll start getting on board because it is a better, more useful technology. Then you get the later majority that are rather budget conscious, I would say. And then you get the laggards at the end when they go, well, everybody else is buying on, why don't I? And that's your typical curve. And that's what's happening in Australia. We're hitting over 10% now battery electric vehicles, as you can see from that graph. Most of them are the full BEV. There was a bit of a pull forward in the first 3 months of this year with PHEVs. The reason was the fringe benefits tax exemption expired on them. Again, the benefits of a PHEV are not as good as a BEV in terms of environment. So they basically grandfathered the PHEV, the PHEV, at the 1st of July, 1st of April for the fringe benefits tax exemption. So there was a bit of a pull forward a whole lot of sales, because once they were bought, they were, for long as they owned them, they can get that leasing benefit. But we're passing 10% overseas. England is about 24, 25%, as is Europe. I think Norway, I know, is 95%, because the bans that I talk about in Norway comes in this year. I think some of the other, Sweden is about 40, 50%. And China is just hitting 50% at the moment of all new car sales are electric vehicles. I do throw this slide in just to remind people, whilst electric cars extraordinarily rarely catch fire, I'll talk more about that a bit later, e-bikes and scooters can, and sometimes do. I wouldn't say often do, but they can. So when it comes to e-bikes and scooter charging, number one is buy a known brand with an Australian compliance mark. So buy it from a supplier in Australia. If you buy it off Alibaba and bring it in, you're the importer. So if something goes wrong, your insurance company goes hunting for the importer, because it's the importer's product liability insurance that will cover your house. So they basically get the money off them. If you turn out to be the importer, they will therefore ask you for the money to repair your own home, i.e. you won't be insured. Always use the charger that came with it. Just because the plug fits doesn't mean it's compatible. The different batteries, as we've all seen, often have the same DC plug, which is really annoying. So it might be the same voltage, but different chemistry and different charge rates, different way of finishing off the charge, etc. Yeah, just for safety, don't park it next to a flammable curtain or a floor. Park it somewhere where, if it did catch a light, make sure it's not going to do any damage. Outside of a hard surface or a concrete garage is not a bad idea. And once they're fully charged, don't have to unplug it instantly, but make sure it's not left for days and weeks. EVs, battery electric cars, have very good battery management systems. The moment they're fully charged, they turn off and you have to restart the process. So they disconnect. With the e-bikes and scooters, they don't necessarily do that. So especially the cheaper ones, so they will keep sort of popping up the charge and eventually could burst into flames if they're not the best quality of battery. If you're after more information, New South Wales government's got a quite interesting safety poster to get some details. More terminology. I apologise for the 3-letter and 4-letter acronyms. I promise there won't be an exam at the end. EVSE is electric vehicle supply equipment, and otherwise known as the car charger. And you've got 3 sorts. There's ones that plug into a power point, and they're the 2 on the left there. Yes, looking at the screen, it will be on your left. And often cars come with that one at the very top left. That's just a 3-pin plug, and that's a standard charger. They can be plugged into any power point, and a lot of people just get away with that, using that. And I'll talk more a bit about that later in terms of do's and don'ts with that sort of charger. The one below I sort of called a jerry can in the boot. If you do a bit of a Leyland Brothers effort and wander out back, I can plug that into anything from a 32 amp or even a 64 amp outlet, 3-phase down to a 10 amp ordinary power point with the right adapters and circuit breakers. As an electrician, I rather like making adapter boxes, so it all packs up into one plastic crate, and I can take that anywhere in Australia. The next one up is the wall-mounted charger. These will give you better control of the charging if you can set timers and all sorts of things, and all set it to be regulated by the solar. Some will actually be smart enough to ramp up and down and measure your solar and only charge via solar, for instance. And there's two basic types. There's the BYO lead, that green and white one there. Councils and public areas like to use those because you don't have to look after the lead. Just like the air hose at a petrol station, it gets run over and is badly treated. The lead on a public charger tends to get rather badly treated and gets a lot of use. So you may as well bring your own and you plug into that socket. So I'll mention that a bit later again, but yeah, your BYO lead and plug into those for councils and other public chargers. For your home charger, I always suggest the tethered lead version, that black wall box, because you just unplug it, stick it in a holster and drive off. You don't need to maybe put the lead away in your boot or worry about it getting stolen because it's attached to the charger. And also, if you only have the one BYO lead and you leave it plugged into the BYO socket all the time, it's probably the one time you wanted to use it as a council charger, it's still plugged into your charger at home. The next one up are the big boys. They're the replacements to your petrol station, and they're the ones that will be used, your Melbourne to Sydney run or Melbourne to Perth. They're the sorts of things. That orange one that looks like Escape from Lost in Space is a very early tritium built in Australia. They were 50 kilowatt charging. I'm going to go back a couple of steps. Those little plug-in ones there will do 1.8 to 2 to 2.4 kilowatts at most. Sometimes they'll do 15 amps, so 3.6. That one at the below there, one of the orange plug can do up to 22 kilowatts AC, depending on the charger built into the car and depending on the power point it's plugged into. But these things, if they will do 50 for the old orange one, or up to 350 for that green and white one there, that's, you can do the math. So 350 divided by 2, that's 175 times faster than the little plug-in one that plugs into a 10 amp power point. You get a fairly fast charge off those, and so they're called fast chargers. A lot of people say, oh, maybe I won't buy one till the plug's sorted. Well, I'll let you into a secret. About 2017-18 here in Australia, the plug was sorted, and it was that pairing there. Your AC plug, so the ones for your home chargers or your portable ones, uses the one at the top, and that's a type 2 plug. It's a 3-phase plug, so it can be single phase or 3-phase, depending on what it's plugged into. Most cars on the market now will do 3-phase charging as well as a single phase charge. So it's a very useful system to get a faster charge. The version below, the CCS, Combined Charging System 2, so it's type 2 plug, it's a type 2 AC, and it's the combined charging system. So the two big pins are for those big fellas that I showed you at the right-hand side of that previous slide, and they do the DC charging. So that's where you get that fast charge from. If you buy there's only 2 cars left with the old pairing, which is that, and that's the Nissan Leaf, the current Nissan Leaf, and the Lexus 300e, and they're both old models. The Nissan Aria, if and when it arrives, actually comes with the CCS2, as does the Lexus 400 or 450 or whatever. The new Lexus also comes with the CCS plug. So the CHAdeMO is also another zombie, or dead man walking, because it is now a legacy plug. And strangely enough, the charging plugs that suit that are disappearing off the DC chargers faster than even I was expecting. So if you buy a car earlier than about 2017, they do come with that pairing. And that's all Japanese cars that are imported as well. So even later model Japanese cars have that pairing because they use the type 1 plug and they use the CHAdeMO system. And I'll talk a little more about the CHAdeMO system later because it will do vehicle to grid now, but there is a caveat on that. And in America, North America in particular, and some parts of, I think, South Korea, that pairing is used. And there's a reason for that, and there's a reason why it will never be seen here. America, or North America, has a peculiar AC system. It's a 2-phase 240 120 volt system. So that's why they have just 2 pins. And obviously that plug is of no use in a 3-phase environment, so we get better charging and a very different electrical system. So North America has in fact settled on that system. They previously were using Type 1 and Tesla used its own plug, and everybody last year jumped on board the Tesla plug. So the North American standard plug is now the NACS, North American charging system. And going forward, all new EVs are generally swapping to that one. Everyone, whenever I do a presentation, I'm sure there's a few lining up in chat already, talk about vehicle to grid. So there are actually 3 layers to getting power out of your battery, and it's generically called V2X, as in vehicle to something. Rather than putting something into the battery, you're getting something out of it. The first layer up is vehicle to load. As I mentioned earlier, CHAdeMO was designed in 2012 to do vehicle to load as well as vehicle to grid, and it put that power out via the DC pins. So as you see that poor guy down the bottom with his very expensive box, very heavy box, plugging his jackhammer into it in order to get AC power out, because it converts the DC to AC. And they're about $10,000, and they're also not legal to import to Australia anyway. CCS system came about a bit later, and they realized, well, there's a AC to DC converter built into the car. Why don't we just make it bidirectional, and we can get some power out instead. So the CCS system made a much better idea and just plugs into the AC port, the little adapter, and it uses the AC to DC converter in the car and just reverses it to put AC out. So the Hyundai Kia Genesis platform will do up to 15 amps. The BYD platform will do sort of 8 to 9 amps. So let me see, 15 amps is about 3.6 kilowatts. The BYD platform is about 2 kilowatts. So if you look at the back of an appliance, you add up the wattages, that gives you an idea of how many things you can plug in. But that's vehicle to load. And as I mentioned, CCS is AC, CHAdeMO is DC. Next layer up is vehicle to home or vehicle to building. You'll see it put a V to H or V to B. And the next layer up again is vehicle to grid. They both basically are the same thing. The key point with vehicle to home and building is it puts power behind the meter. So behind from the car into the switchboard, and it puts a conversion box on the wall, convert DC to AC. So it takes power from the DC pins and converts it to AC on the wall. In the vehicle to home system, you will have the house turn off momentarily to switch over to the car. So it keeps the vehicle, electricity in a house completely isolated from the grid, and it must never connect. That's the whole point of vehicle to home. Really good for blackouts and things, but you will have a little gap when you turn from the grid to the car, and vice versa when you go back from the car to the grid. There'll be just a little off and on. It breaks the connection before it makes the new one. For electrician speak, break before make. Vehicle to grid, on the other hand, is purely seamless. It will actually put power out to the grid. It can put power into the home. You can just use it for powering the house only or selling it to the grid, and you get that very seamless transition. And currently at the moment, as I said, CHAdeMO does all of those things, but you can't buy the boxes. There were some test systems done, and South Australia and the ACT were doing practice sessions. I'll just move Lyndall off my screen. It's just if you could pop your camera off, please. The whole point of the tests were, yes, the vehicle to grid systems really work, and they were using the CHAdeMO system. The key point with those was that you can't buy the vehicle to grid box for CHAdeMO systems anymore. So if you can get hold of one of the few that weren't installed, you're doing well. You can put them in now. So you can actually put in a vehicle to home system. The battery standard was changed late last year to include cars. So they're now a form of battery. So they can be used as a vehicle to grid, or sorry, vehicle to home. Vehicle to grid will take a little longer for a generic rollout. There's still a bit of argy-bargy about how they'll talk to the grid and how the grid will talk to them. So if you want vehicle to home, the suppliers of the boxes will be making announcements between July and September this year, and they're basically all just waiting on the manufacturer saying, yes, our cars can do it. And there are a number of them that can do it. It's just a software change. As I said, the Hyundai eGMP platform, which is Hyundai Genesis Kia, technically can do it overseas. It's just a matter of switching it. The VWs, as they arrive, can do it against software. And there's a couple of others. I can't think of off the top of my head, but they can technically do it, but they need to actually announce it and therefore warranty that you can use it. You can perhaps use them now, but the problem is the warranty won't cover it. I think I put all that in writing there just as reminders. So 2025, 26, you'll be able to start putting in vehicle to home systems, and it will be at early adopter prices as a warning, but they will get cheaper relatively quickly after that, probably $10,000 to begin with, and they should work their way down to 5,000 or less within 12, 18 months. And vehicle to grid maybe another 6 to 12 months after that, so late next year, early the one after. Vehicle to load, as I mentioned earlier, if you just add up the wattages, I mentioned those numbers a bit earlier. There's a whole article, follow that QR code there on the driven. It's just a matter of adding up the wattages. The only key point is if you're using a power source, something with a motor, it does have a bit of a spike in current on startup, so maybe a bit of headway if you're going to use something with an electric motor in it. But otherwise, they're the sort of numbers you can use to charge or to run your things. Refueling, we're used to that model. We make our trip we go out of our way to refuel the car and stop within the trip in order to do it and make our way off the roads and off the major highways, whatever, in order to refuel. As it comes to EVs, however, car sits around 95% of the time. We make use of the time the car's sitting there doing nothing to refuel. So we've actually shifted refueling out of our trip and into it sitting doing nothing. So most charging happens at home, but we could charge at the library, the shops, there's charges at parks, all over the place. You can actually just recharge and work even. Workplace charging will become a thing as the grid is going more to renewables, and we need to soak up more of the solar during the day. So there will probably be some incentives not too far away for installing workplace charging even. So that's our new model. The whole point is that the time spent in that 95% of the time the car's sitting doing nothing doesn't really matter when it comes to charging. So it's horses for courses. What we look at is if you're doing less than 100 Ks in a day, a PowerPoint will probably do the job. Overnight charge, 2 kilowatts, you'll be charging less than 8 hours. And if it's an installation somewhere near the switchboard, around $500 to put in that PowerPoint. It should always go back to, for one that's dedicated to charging and used a lot for charging, it should actually be connected directly to switchboard on its own circuit breaker. Obviously, it's okay to use a low power portable charger at an Airbnb or something occasionally, but if you're using a PowerPoint all the time and it's hooked in with all other circuits, A, something might turn the electric kettle on and trip the circuit, and B, if you're daisy chaining with all other PowerPoints, there's always those weak links. Like that. That's an extension lead with a daisy chain to a couple of plugs, and they can melt quite quickly once they get a bit warm, a bit loose. So always check if you do use an extension lead, use a really good heavy duty cable, use it with screw together plugs, plug and socket, and check it for if it's getting a bit warm every time you use it at the finish of the day. If you're within range of a full charge, so you might be doing 300, 500 Ks in a day, you'll need a home charger like that one. And my Kona, if I was to recharge from 0 to 100, I could get it done overnight. I never recharge 0 to 100. Generally, I'll roll in on finally will recharge 2 to 3 weeks. Every 2 to 3 weeks, starting about 20%, and I'll charge it up to about 90%. It's like a petrol car. You don't fill it up fully if you don't use the petrol quickly because it goes stale. In an electric car, it's just kinder to the battery to not take it fully to 100% if you don't need to. And they're 1,500 up, including a charger installed if it's an easy install. How fast can you charge? This QR code will take you to an article at the Driven with a whole lot more detail. But the key point is those two numbers in red for a PowerPoint, that's generally the portable charger that will come with the car. 1.8 kilowatts, sort of detuned a bit from a 10 amp or 2.4 kilowatts. And it will do about 12 kilometers charged an hour. So if you plug into an Airbnb and you drive there, recharge 18 hours or so, you get a pretty good near 100% recharge. 15 amp power points, our caravan outlet, is pretty much caravan parks are a marriage made in heaven with EVs. Because if you roll in about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, plug in, go to town, have dinner, go to sleep, next morning you'll be 100% charged on your way again. And for your home chargers, normal charge on a single phase house is about 48 kilometers-ish per hour. If you happen to have 3-phase, an 11 kilowatt car, which most of the cars on the market now, and it's kind of to the grid and to your load at home, if you put it actually spread across 3 loads or 3 phases, the key point is you'll get nearly 50 kilometers charged an hour. And if you happen to have a car with 22 kilowatt AC charging, you'll get nearly 150 kilometers charged an hour. So yeah, they're the sort of numbers. This is probably worth just keeping this chart in your glove box even. When it comes to the DC charging, the old 50 kilowatt chargers, that orange one at the top there, 20 minutes for 100 Ks. For the current crop of EV chargers going in, they're around 150 kilowatts now. That's 6 minutes for 100 Ks is a very rough number. And if you're going for the high-end cars that will do 300 or more kilometers charged, 300 or more kilowatt hours, 2.6 minutes for 100 Ks. I mean, if you're stopping at a roadhouse and going in the latest Hyundai Ioniq 5, for instance, at about 230 kilowatts, will do an 0 to 80% charge in about 17, 18 minutes, which is barely enough time to get in and have a cup of coffee, go to the toilet, or your usual roadhouse trips. So just how fast do you really need to get past 200, 250 kilowatts? I was involved in a course written for electricians on installing and understanding EV charging. And it's sort of a rule of thumb, if you do more than 4 hours a time, more than twice a week, perhaps go up a level in charging. So if you're doing 6 hours 4 times a week on a PowerPoint, maybe install a 15 amp PowerPoint instead. And the same deal for if you're doing that on a 15 amp, plug in the 32 amp charger and you'll get a full charge overnight. Another big question I get is how far can you go on a charge? This shows I've circled there for my Hyundai Kona. There's 3 standards that are generally used. NEDC, that's still Australia's standard. That will be changing soon to the WLTP system that was adopted in Europe in 2017. WLTP is designed for European driving conditions, so a lot of city driving and a bit of outer suburban, some highway travel, whereas the US EPA number is more middle to outer suburban driving and higher speed highway and more highway. So they just bias it towards the type of driving that people do in those countries. So the US EPA number you will get if you're driving on the highways. My Kona will do about 420. If I do a Melbourne to Sydney trip, I can bank on comfortably getting 420 kilometres on a full charge. If I'm driving around suburbia and out into a bit of outer suburban stuff, 480 is quite a good number. I will expect that. If I'm driving around town, I have actually seen it show me even 570 kilometres. And I know I can safely get anything up to about 520 around town. But the NEDC number as a expected number for all your driving, I've forgotten what NEDC probably stands for, but not even done close is about right. Subtract about 30% off an NEDC number to get a realistic range. And if you're driving mainly around town, choose the WLTP number. And if you're doing a lot of country driving, use the US EPA number. If, however, you're comparing cars, it doesn't matter which standard you're using, just make sure you're using the same standard for all. The fact sheets I'll refer to a bit later will in fact have all 3 standards listed if they're sold in the US or the Europe. So otherwise, sometimes they only get 2. And I think the rest of this part of the slide is only the written part of what I just said. Yep. And the Renew articles I've also reproduced on my website. So that's evnews.com.au. And you'll just click on EV information there. If you subscribe to Renew, which is a really good idea, because they cover a lot more than just EVs. They do home electrification, energy saving tips, lots of really interesting stuff, and a really good organization to join and support that sort of work. Join Renew. I think I mentioned that website for at the end of this presentation. Yes, will it go the distance? That's me on the way to Perth in 2022. Doing some EV safety training over there for the unis. In those days, the Poochera pub was a standard shot for all EV owners using a 3-phase outlet at the Poochera pub. That's no longer available because there's now DC chargers all the way across. That was basically I had to stop there for 3 hours, charging at 7 kilowatts, single phase, because my Kona only does single phase. If I had a 11 kilowatt 3-phase charger, I would have been there for 2 hours. And if I had a 22 kilowatt AC car, I would have been there for 1 hour. My next EV will have 22 kilowatt AC charging, because if I go really out back, having that higher AC charging is quite handy before the rollout of the DC chargers finishes. There is the plug share map in very coarse detail. Those orange, I've listed 2 types of chargers You can filter for up to 13 different plugs. The orange ones are DC chargers, as you can see there. They're now all the way across the nullable. And the green ones are the 32 amp wall mounted type ones, so like council type ones and things that you can drop into. And if you filter for caravan outlets and council outlets and power points that people are willing to share, that map gets quite covered in dots. On the other hand, it would have about 5 or 6 dots of publicly available hydrogen outlets, but maybe we won't go there. So if you're going out in the country, you focus in on a part of the plug share map, and then you'll click on one of those orange dots and you get this sort of detail. It'll let you tell you how much it is, where it is. Often it's a bit of a game of where's Wally for some of these charges. The signage is not fully standardized yet. There is a standard coming out very soon with standard markings, just like the highway signs have for petrol stations and accommodation and caravan parks and meals. There will be a symbol for EV charging. But at the moment, sometimes it's where's Wally, and the pictures on PlugShare are really handy to find a very difficult to find charger. Looking into the future, as I said, most charging is done at home. If you've got off-street parking, that's where you do almost all your charging, except when you're doing a long-distance drive. Then you've got your car parks and all that sort of thing that are having AC chargers springing up all over the place. In France, they say any car park with over 90 parking spots must have a solar roof and their car charging. There's obviously the large petrol stations are swapping over to DC chargers. That's the petrol station on the corner of North Road and the Pean Highway in East Brighton. When they first installed that was one charger. It's now gone up to 4. Doesn't get a lot of use because most people around there have off-street parking, but it's very handy for those times when someone forgot to plug in. They can just pull in 10 minutes of one of those, that Ioniq 5 there. In 10 minutes, you'd get pretty much probably 40-50% of a charge. 5 minutes even will give you 100 Ks or more. As I said, it was 6 minutes for 100 Ks. Then you've got what was the closed network of the Teslas. That's in Keith on the way to Adelaide. 50% of chargers in the Tesla network are now open to everybody because the plug standard is settled. They use the same plug as everybody else. Therefore, you can use their chargers. So just again, look at PlugShare and we'll list whether the Tesla charger is open to everybody. NRMA put in a really nice set of chargers, and they were very early in the piece. So when I started driving to Sydney back in 2019, I almost exclusively, in fact, that was all that was available. Nowadays, they've taken over the NRMA, and all the road authority or road organisations have bought out ChargeFox. So the NRMA network's being rolled into the ChargeFox network. And of course, the EV network is another one. They're like ChargeFox. They're slowly rolling out around Australia. EV, by the way, have a really neat system. They have a plug-in charge system. Once you've registered your car with it and done one charge via the EV system, it will then be able to recognize your car. You just say, this is my car. And then you don't need any swipe cards, no apps, nothing. You just plug in and it just charges away. You might want the app to check. You can go out for lunch or whatever, and you can just use the app to keep an eye on the charge level. And when it's ready, you can wander back. As I said, finding a charge station, plugshare.com is the place to go. And that's where you just look around your local area if you want one, or a new area of town if you happen to be coming in. Then you go to the provider apps themselves. So PlugShare will then point you towards EV or ChargeFox or the others. There's a number listed there. Ampol actually have their own network. BP, as I said, and there's a couple of others coming around. Jolt and a few others I can't think off the top of my head. The annoying part is that at the moment we need separate apps to run them. The good part is in England, for instance, they've said you must have one app to rule them all. So any one app should be able to run all the others. The swipe cards, at the moment you have one for each network, although I will let you into secret. If you register the same swipe card across the different networks, it will generally work the same swipe card for all the networks. Hence, you can get a universal swipe card from the Australian Electric Vehicle Association, but any swipe card, I believe, will be registrable across all of them. Promoting EV uptake, we'll talk a bit about policy. You've got your carrots, your sticks, and the policy itself. Around the world, there's the big stick. There will be bans on the sale of new internal combustion engine, passenger, and light commercial vehicles. Norway, it's this year, and they've hit 95% plug-in electric vehicles. Europe has set 2035. There's been a bit of pushback with a bit of culture wars going on even there with sort of EV versus fossil fuel, but Even so, manufacturers themselves recognise the writing is on the wall. Jaguar said they won't build an internal combustion engine car past this year and have stopped building them. It's now electric cars only. Volvo did say they'll be next year would be 2026. They'll sell only BEVs here, and 2030 around the world. That's been pushed back a little bit with that culture war. They said now that they'll sell them if people want them after those dates. I'm not sure what they're doing with Australia. They've gone very quiet there. But all the other manufacturers have set rough dates about when they'll just not be building fossil fuel vehicles anymore. Here's a bit of a selection of new BEVs coming for this year, or some that have already arrived. Leapmotor C10 has arrived late last year. I had one of those on test recently. I'll be putting a test report together in the next week or two for the driven. I wasn't wildly impressed with it, to be honest, but yeah, horses for courses, I think. Renault bringing their mad, what do you call it, space frame, fiberglass shell, electric mad machine, $200,000 or $300,000 late this year. Zeekr, another new Chinese brand, that will be coming second half of this year. Maserati are actually bringing one out later this year. We've seen the BZ4X Toyota. There's actually a BZ4X Tourer or wagon coming out overseas later this year, so I'm guessing that will come here. It will be all-wheel drive as well as two-wheel drive, and as well as the Subaru Solterra, which is basically the same car with a few tweaks to make it look more Subaru-like. MG Cyberster, which is the first two-door convertible electric car, arrived late last year, and they're just bringing out a two-wheel drive version of that now. But excuse me a moment. Jeep Avenger, I actually had a loan one recently. I was actually pleasantly surprised by it. Although driving around with it's not a Jeep, but it's actually a really good electric car. The key point is it's built in Poland, not America, which is probably why it's not a Jeep in a way. Nissan Ariya has been promised for many years now. Been overseas for 3 years or more. The latest announcement from Nissan Australia is it will be here before the end of the Japanese financial year. Although I'll let you into a secret, Japanese financial year ends March next year. So we may not see it until next year. VW have just arrived with theirs, the ID4, the VW Buzz, the Combi replacement. The Hyundai Insta has just arrived, as has the Kia EV3. So some smaller, cheaper EVs are now arriving, as well as some of the selection of Chinese EVs, the first of which are breaking the $30,000 before on-road cost barrier already. Even utes and vans. Well, I'm going to look into more of the trucks in the next few weeks to write some articles. But these are some of the things. The real, probably game changer with the LDV e-Teron 9. It's due within the next couple of months. Big battery, basically sort of take on the pretty boy Ford Rangers and things with 1,000 horsepower they're talking about. As I talked about a little bit earlier, I think, but the Ford F-150 Lightning, if I hadn't talked about it then, that photo of the vehicle to load was actually a Ford F-150 Lightning in the US. They're available in the US and have been for several years now. There are right-hand drive conversions here in Australia, and several companies doing those conversions. And the Ford E-Transit, the one-ton version of the Ford Transit, they've just announced the price, and it will be available within a couple of months. As I said earlier, the price of batteries has been coming down by an order of magnitude. 2010, $1,220 US per kilowatt hour. 2024, 25 is getting down to 110. $100 per kilowatt hour is the magic number when you get a price parity between a petrol car and a similar sized, similar segment electric full battery electric vehicle. So that's why the plug-in hybrid vehicles are starting to running out of a use case when you can buy a battery car with far less maintenance, far less fossil fuel. In fact, no fossil fuel use directly, no tailpipe emissions, becoming equally affordable. Cost to run an EV. This is a comparison between the petrol Kona and the electric Kona. I've just picked some numbers, 14.7 kilowatt hours. These are NEDC numbers, but I'm doing a like-for-like comparison, so I'm reasonable to do that. Thankfully, WLTP data, I should say. That took a bit of finding, I must admit. Cost comparison, nearly $1,000 a year if you're doing 10,000 Ks. If you're doing 20,000 Ks, nearly $2,000. And that's if you're running off-peak electricity. If you're running off your own solar, even more. And service, 2 years on the electric, 1 year on the petrol, so about $60 difference. As I said, about $1,000 per 10,000 Ks. If you're doing 50,000 Ks a year, which some commercial travelers might be doing, you're saying 5,000. It starts stacking up very quickly, the cost difference already for total cost for TCO. Do like to throw this set of slides in, a bit of EV myth busting. As I said, a lot of people say, oh, all the petrol stations have to be converted to electric charging before I can look at one. Yeah, well, if our home is our EV charging point, we don't go to the local petrol station anymore. So the key point is 90% of petrol stations, as in 90% of that charging is done at home, will have to start getting very nervous because their business model is disappearing. So you don't need to wait till they're one-to-one. As I said, our stopping point is now our charging point, unless you're going well in the city. The big roadhouses will be converting, and you'll be noticing EV chargers coming up either in or behind the roadhouses, and that's becoming more and more so. Oh dear, this one. EVs are always hitting the headlines about catching fire. Well, they don't do it very often. They just be hitting the headlines on the rare ones that do. All the Nissan Leafs ever built, I'll start off with this one. Hybrid vehicles, this is an insurance company in America did this analysis a year or so ago. They find they have 100,000 sales, roughly 3,500 of them go up in flames. Roughly 1,500 petrol cars go up in flames and 25 electric. So take-home message from that is, if you want a car that doesn't catch fire, don't buy a hybrid. And it comes in Nissan Leaf in 13, 14 years, actually 15 years now. I must update that number. All of Nissan Leaf sold, none of them get caught fire yet. Although there was one fire recently that they're still investigating, so I may be proved wrong on that one. As I said, the fuel cell EV, this is the number crunching if anybody asks. 100 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity. If you plug that into a battery, you'll get 69 kilowatt hours of movement from the car. So 69% efficient by the time you put it through the grid, converted that AC to DC and run the car. On the other hand, if you use that same 100 kilowatts of energy and create hydrogen, you'll get hydrogen car than it is to run an electric car. So just in terms of what it will cost to refuel them, let alone the inability to find refueling points, the fuel cell car it's just not going to take off. Also, our EV is more polluting. Well, this is running to start with, and this is using the National Greenhouse Accounting Factors. If you drive a Corolla, current model Corolla, 10,000 kilometers a year, you'll get roughly 1.5 tons of CO2 equivalent gases, so CO2 and various other gases, 1.5 tons put out by that Corolla. If you're running the current model Kona, in Tasmania is an extreme example where they have hydro, mostly renewables, 0.23, so less than a quarter of a ton. So that's better than 1/6. Even in Victoria with our brown coal, it's 1.41. So we're getting better as our grid greens. I've been doing this analysis since 2012, every 5 years. And as I do it each 5 years, it actually gets better each time. That's the running costs. When it comes to the lifetime costs, some people say, oh, but what about the battery? You must use lots of energy to make that. Well, in the US, it's 6 to 16 months if you're just running it off a coal-fired generator to build a car, to pay back that carbon debt, so to speak. In Europe, where they do a few extra Ks, they do fewer Ks per year, they say it's about 2 years. Key point, though, is Volvo, Polestar, various manufacturers, are moving to zero carbon debt as it moves out of the factory because they're running green energy into those factories. Even working on trying to get green steel, all that type of thing, which means they will have no carbon debt from day one. Yes, another one is EVs will bring down the grid. Well, a few points. One is if it's a free-for-all, yes, you may have a bit of a peak if everybody plugged in when the air conditioners are on a hot day. But there again, people do line up to save 2 cents a litre on fuel, so they're not going to refuel their electric vehicles at the most expensive kilowatt hours. They're going to do it in the off-peak or off their own solar. So it's a very movable feast when you can recharge, unlike when you need to be cool. So I think I've just made a few dot points on the next slide. Yeah, they don't, about 10% more is if all our cars converted to EVs overnight in our driveway, it would add roughly 10% more to the total demand now. And many supply authorities have actually said in England, when they were debating 2030 or 2035, the national grid people were saying, we don't mind if you choose 2030, we'll be ready. But it's a management of the demand. As I said before, hydrogen cars will create significantly more electricity needs. So unless we had a full green grid with lots of spare capacity, hydrogen really isn't a good way to go. As I said, they're a discretionary load, and there's a few references there. I do like this one of people say, oh, but the mining's terrible. It's a third. It's basically you can pick on any mine, the mining type, that will be somewhere in the world a really bad example. Bougainville's copper mine and various other things was a classic example of polluting. In Brazil, there was that mine that the tailings dam collapsed and killed hundreds of people. It doesn't necessarily have to be an EV-related thing. It's the way we dig things out. If we can do it well or do it badly, all mining does damage. As I said, with cobalt, which is the one that's most cited, many manufacturers are working to source ethical cobalt. And Australia does produce cobalt now and more of it. It is less than 10% of battery, and various batteries are actually phasing it out. If you want to hear a bit more about that, there's an article I wrote back in 2019 now. So, correctly, it's getting 6 years. EV chargers are not that expensive to install, and they don't necessarily trigger a whole upgrade that some electricians were in the early days saying. I was involved in writing an electric vehicle charging course for electricians in order to make sure that they didn't. Basically, any charging solution can be installed on almost any house. It's just a matter of setting it up properly. And so if you're looking for an electrician to install, find someone who's done that 22609 VIC course. About 500-600 electricians already have been through it, and it's a course, accredited course that can be run at any TAFE or registered training organisation. If you want to future-proof your EV installation, this is sort of the 30-second version of what we teach the electricians over the day. Number one, smart chargers may be mandated over 20 amps to be a demand managed thing. So it won't let you charge at full whack during the hot afternoon. It also might give you options with a smart charger to select the cheapest tariff, so it will always recharge at the cheapest time. That's what's coming. Your vehicle to grid type options are coming, so you may want to put in a different type of charger later on instead of a power point. So to be prepared, put in the right size cable, so 6 square mil or 10 square mil cable. Even if you're just putting an ordinary power point or a 15 amp power point with appropriate breaker at the other end, if you just swap the ends, it's a lot cheaper than putting in a new cable. Data cable between the charger and the switchboard or to a data hub is really useful. Most of them probably will be Wi-Fi, but the key point is that it's hard to put cable in later. So if you're throwing in a cable now for the charger, throw in the data as well. If you're putting in a charger with Open Charge Point Protocol 2.0.1 or above, it most likely will be capable of being a smart charger later on when there's more smart charging features are available. It won't be a vehicle to grid or vehicle to home charger. They're another special type of charger which you can't buy yet. A few more practicalities. If you've got an old switchboard like that, as an electrician, I cringe. You will need a new switchboard. They are just impossible to work on. There's a whole article on that if you new. Off-street parking and off-street charging is a really handy thing to have. Always worth sourcing and sorting out. Electricity tariffs can be a trap for young players. If someone puts you on the wrong tariff, you can pay through the nose for it. Just choose the right tariff. Just beware. Smart and dumb charger. I do a whole presentation on smart and dumb chargers, which you just won't go into here. But if you want to look into that more deeply, I wrote an article about 18 months ago on that one. As I said before, a BYO lead, they're about $200-ish, worth throwing in the boot for those public charges. And if you do happen to go off the beaten track, one of those is quite handy, but 99.9% of people don't really need one. Those articles are also at my EV Choice website. EV information sheets for the models available. There is a summary page updated every month on all the EV passenger cars on the market. Same for the ones coming soon. There's one listing all the ones that have been officially confirmed by manufacturers that will be coming here and a date for when they're coming. And there's also one for light commercials for here and coming. And for every vehicle that is on the market now, there is a 2-page fact sheet with all the same headings, as I said earlier, with the ranges listed as well. And you can find it all there. there's now a second-hand market, a viable second-hand market coming up. So I started a second-hand market sheet about April last year, so just over a year ago now. And when they roll into being a second-hand car, that fact sheet changes with a couple of different headings, one of which includes things to look for, known things to look for, or just generic things to look for when buying a second-hand EV. That QR code will take you to the AEVA, Australian Electric Vehicle Association website, and the fact sheets are all there. As I've said earlier, Renew is a really good organisation to join, and they're the ones that are running the Sustainable House Day. I've done a few articles in there, a couple of examples, how to check a second-hand EV back in 2022. Most recent, the Chinese are coming. Oops, they're here already. Australian Electric Vehicle Association, you can join them, and you'll also go to the discussion forum that has a really good set of people to ask questions about EVs. Some websites, you've got the Driven, which I wrote for. You've got the Electric Vehicle Council. I have a number of really useful fact sheets and information. And I set my own website for those articles. And apologies to the organisers, I'll run 5 minutes over. That's the last slide. Here's my EV news at Big Pond. If you have any burning questions, I'll stop sharing and we can start the panel.
Great work. Thank you, Bryce, for an incredibly informative. For those of you wondering, will we be recording this? Yes, we are. And we'll be sharing the link so you can go back and look at all of Bryce's information. I'm going to invite Ian Colbard and Ned Kilpatrick and Natalie Bucknell to magically appear on the screen. I'll ask that others keep their cameras off if they can. And this is our panel. So Natalie Bucknell, of course, from Clean Energy Nillumbik, along with Ned Kilpatrick, both enthusiastic EV owners and drivers and users. And Ian Colbard from Nillumbik Shire Council. A special thank you to Nillumbik Shire Council for setting up tonight's webinar. So this is where I throw it open to people to type questions in the chat, please. So that we can keep an order to the questions and make sure that we can work our way through them. I guess I would throw it open to ask, I'm going to hit Ian up first to talk about charging around the Shire, around the area in the suburbs, what that looks like at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And also thanks, Bryce. That was a great presentation. I've learned a bit tonight, so thank you. It was really good. Just briefly, from the Nillumbik Shire perspective, we've installed public charging in Eltham, at Eltham Leisure Centre, public charging also at the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre and Community Bank Stadium. So they're all public charging available to anyone. They're free charges and they are 7 kilowatts to anyone that needs it. They are on the ChargeFox platform as well. So you actually need to have the ChargeFox app or RFID card to be able to use that charging system. And we're also in the process of facilitating, I suppose is the best way to put it, some fast charging in the Eltham Town Square area. But that's not actually council owned, it's not council managed, that's actually a developer doing that through a grant funded program started by the federal government some years ago. It's taken a while to get to that. So that'll be opening hopefully in the next few weeks. So if you're looking to do some fast charging in Eltham, that'll be there. Also at the moment, we're looking to establish the first public charging in Hurstbridge. So ideally that'll be something that's up and running in the next, well, let's say just by the end of the year. So there's a few things to do in order to make that happen, but that's definitely in the pipeline. So that's just a little bit about what Council's working on. In terms of what we've done for ourselves, we have recently completed the complete transition of all of our passenger vehicles. So we actually now have 9 vehicles available to staff to use, and all of those passenger vehicles are now full electric, the BEV, as you're saying, Bryce. Examples being the MG4, the Subaru Solterra, the Hyundai Ioniq, and the Renault Kangoo. We also are looking into the potential to start transitioning a lot of our plants and our fleet and our four-wheel drives as well. And where possible, actually reducing the number of vehicles in total. So trying to make it far more efficient and electric so much as we possibly can. So we have issues to deal with in terms of infrastructure, but that's just the way it is. And that's what Bryce was alluding to about home chargers, etc.
I was on council not too long ago, and I should remind people when we say by the end of the year, we didn't say which year. So anyway, what about Natalie and Ned? You are local EV users and drivers. What's your experience of charging and running and day to day?
Ned, do you want to go first?
Okay, yes. So I'm in Diamond Creek, and we've been all electric for 6 years now. We have a 2019 Tesla Model 3 and an older model Nissan Leaf. We sort of tried to decide for years and years whether to go a hybrid or to go full battery electric. But when our combustion engine petrol car died, just blew up, the engine blew up and it was dead. It sort of precipitated us to go to electric. And then once I drove the electric, we actually sold the other petrol car and bought a second-hand Leaf that was only about $14,000. And so just living with them, I think the biggest difference is that, as Bryce said, the habit of charging or refueling is when you get home. So in fact, it takes you about 30 seconds to recharge because you come home and you plug the car in and then you don't think about it, and it's charged when you next need to go out. So there isn't that using a petrol station as a hub. So again, like Bryce said, there just isn't that one-for-one replacement of every petrol Bowser with an EV charger, because you're actually very much independent of the petroleum companies, because especially if you've got your own solar, you're not, and you can charge off the solar during the day, you're not actually paying anything for your daily charging. And you're actually consuming your own solar, so you're not even taking the coal-fired power off the grid. So factoring in the lack of maintenance for engine oil and servicing and parts wearing out on a normal car, we basically factored in, for each car we converted to electric, we were saving $5,000 in fuel and servicing combined each year. So after 6 years, per car, we've saved $30,000. So when you compare that to how much more expensive they were 6 years ago, even that has paid itself off in those 6 years. But now the EVs are at parity for buying new, and there are lots more cars on the second-hand market. So, Nat, what's your experience?
Hi everyone. Yeah, we got an electric Kona back in 2019, and we've absolutely loved it. We mostly try and charge it off our solar, and we're well and truly overdue for getting a proper home charger installed, but we've just been charging it off for PowerPoint, and we followed that up last year with getting another Kona to take advantage of the fringe benefits tax that Bryce mentioned with novated leases. So currently we can, with electric electric vehicles under a novated lease, there's no fringe benefits tax. So our novated lease can cover all the costs of our vehicle for us, including charging costs and insurance and registration and everything pre-tax. So that makes it very attractive. So yeah, we need to get home charger installed, and it's an absolute dream. Just filling it up at home every time we get back home, plug it in. I have really mixed experiences with public chargers, and I'm really glad to see that there's more of them coming and that they're simplifying their use a bit more, because I've had some really hair pulling out experiences trying to get apps to work and turning up at a charger that I'm relying on and finding it's out of order. And so I'm learning about this is pretty rare because we charge at home 95% of the time, but I'm learning now to look ahead, make sure that the charger I'm counting on is operational, that there's no one there, and that I have the right RFID. Bryce talked earlier about this plug and charge system, and that was news to me. So I'm going to be looking up a bit more about that, Bryce, and how to access it and which chargers are eligible and whether my car can work with it, because that sounds like it will simplify things a lot. I also worry by the time I'm 90, I'll have trouble handling those DC plugs into the car, but I'm counting on the technology changing a bit between now and then. So yeah, definitely, some mixed experiences with public charging, but it's irrelevant most of the time to our driving.
Bryce, you've obviously answered the question here about some of the models coming on, MG4 and the BYD Dolphin, for entry-level small EVs. What's your experience of that as a category of EV, the entry-level?
It's very annoying that there's no really small EVs. They've been bringing in all these sort of small SUVs, medium SUVs, large SUVs, small cars. There's not many small passengers around. That fact sheet that I was referring Virginia to there actually lists the size category as well. So if you want a small passenger, I think I'm just looking across, the BYD Dolphin is a small passenger, it's probably one of the smallest. And it's at the cheaper end. For bang for buck and good features, it's probably a pick in that category. The Fiat 500e, you can get some quite good deals on demonstrators and some recent new ones that are around the same sort of price. It's a bit less range than the BYD, but it is a fun little car. I did really like the Fiat 500e as a car, but it is a more expensive one. It's from Europe rather than built in Italy.
Yes, someone just asked, is there a link for the fact sheet? We will send out links for people to follow up on the fact sheets. So I'm sure we'll be able to get that information out to everyone that's registered.
Let's go to aeva.asn.au. That'll take you to the main Australian, or just search for Australian Electric Vehicle Association. There's the information tab on the front page.
And there we go. Natalie's dropped it in. I like the machine she is. She's found it and dropped it into the chat. Very good. For those of us who can't get solar on our roofs, and that would apply to a few people in and around this kind of bushy area, the argument still stacks up for an EV, doesn't it? If you can't actually generate your own energy for an EV, for those of us who can't get solar, what would you say? That's you, Bryce. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking about one of the questions. I should be concentrating more on the screen. If you can't get solar, you can subscribe to green power. It's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It's somewhat frustrating. The ChargeFox network does do green power. The EV network used to, but I believe they only connect it if requested by when they're being installed. The council's organising it. The council asks for it. So as far as I know, ChargeFox still do green energy, so that's the other option as well. But yeah, subscribing to green power is all you can do if you have got no solar.
Okay.
But in terms of costs and emissions, even if you're not subscribing to green power, you're still going to be way ahead than,
Oh yeah.
running off a petrol car. It's still going to be way cheaper. And as Bryce showed on that graph, even Victoria with our coal-fired power, it's still lower emissions using the grid energy.
Ian's got a thing to say.
Yeah, and no, just and mentioning on just on that point as an EV owner as well, it's also the retail power plan that you subscribe to makes quite a big difference, and the use of if it's for cost saving using off-peak power, and some actually have EV charge rates that are overnight as low as 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So it actually brings the cost of charging down significantly, and also some of them have some free rates during the day. So you can so when the solar is producing maximum within the grid, that's quite stressful on the grid. So some retailers are offering free electricity during the day through their plan, the retail plan. So definitely look at your retailer, and maybe the Victorian government's Energy Compare website's a great place to go to check your retail energy plan and compare if there's something better, not just for EVs, but also just generally to save.
Also, I would say even if you haven't got solar, the new, if you like, the new off-peak times for plentiful grid supply are in fact now in the middle of the day, not in the middle of the night, as used to be the case with coal-fired power stations that would not be fully turned off. So even if you're charging at 20 cents per kilowatt hour, that compares to buying petrol at $2 at 5 or 6 times cheaper than buying petrol to fill up your car per kilometre.
Bryce, I've got a question about the FEVs, the hybrids, petrol hybrid vehicles you were talking about before. I think you said there was a tax cut-off earlier in this year, and there was a peak of people buying these vehicles. Are people getting a hybrid because they think it's their version of transition? They can't quite let go of a fuel engine?
That's a very good way of putting it. It's a big mental leap to go straight from a fossil fuel car to a full electric car. So FEVs were very much a stepping stone along the way, but it's sort of a technology that's almost passed itself by. It's just the electric car is now so good, so cheap, and such a good range. So people are still a little bit nervous about making that transition. With the longer ranges of new FEVs, it wouldn't surprise me if people are driving around almost entirely on electric, or driving and going, why did I buy the FEV?
Right. And
the early ones
ostensibly, how long can they keep driving around on battery before they have to start using the fuel?
It really
It's
depends on the
question,
size battery in it. So some of them are 30, 40, some are sort of 70, 80 kilometers.
Okay,
Some
right.
of the ones 5 or 6 years ago were down to about 12 to 20, but they're thankfully they're getting bigger batteries in again.
Okay.
I think the new BYD Shark, it's basically an electric. It has about 20 kilowatt hour, quite a medium size battery, and it has a petrol engine, but the petrol engine is just like a generator. So it always drives off the electric motors, but the petrol is just to give it an extra range and recharge that battery as you're driving.
Although there is a key point with those ones. If you're using a plug-in hybrid, always recharge it off the power point. If you use the petrol motor to recharge it, it's the worst of all worlds because it's the most inefficient way of producing electricity.
Right. But it's range anxiety, isn't it? That's what that market is all about. Okay.
Yeah, the studies basically of people buying their EV with range anxiety say after a month, it's no longer there. You've got used to that mental change of we don't go to a petrol station, we charge at home. So range anxiety vanishes.
Right. I did notice.
We decided. Sorry, we decided that after years of thinking we would get a hybrid, we realised that if you've got the petrol engine component, you still have to pay for the servicing.
Right.
And even if you don't use the engine part, you still have to have the oil, and it's got all the disadvantages of petrol, but without full advantages of the battery, the BEV.
Yep. Who's that? Renee just saying that they wish they'd gone 100% EV. But I can well understand people going, I want to transition, but I have these fears about a network. But in a way, you've said that the network has appeared over that time now. The number of charging stations, the number of options people have got, the simplification of the actual plugs so that you didn't have to have a range of different attachments. I don't know about the flying cars. If people talk about road rage, air rage would just be a whole next level thing. So
I really agree with what Renee's commenting too about family cars. There's not much yet in affordable range of like people movers or things like that in the electric space. Is that coming, Bryce?
Yes, well, you've got, well, it's not affordable yet, but the VW ID Buzz, the combi replacement is a people mover. If you go through that fact sheet, there's actually, if you look for the PM, there's actually a growing number of people movers turning up now.
It's just the price is
It's
still
just the price.
got to come down. On the topic of price, I visited a household with Sustainable House Day Open Day a couple of weeks ago, and that household, they'd bought their EV, an ex-fleet vehicle through Pickles Auctions, and it was really reasonable in price and pretty low kilometres, and they were having a great experience with that. So yeah, that second-hand market is kicking in more and more, is extending the options, which is really great.
The Pickles are generally 40 to 50 second-hand EVs every week. Mannheims are generally about 10 to 15.
And for those wanting to dip their toe in, so to speak, and begin with the second-hand EV, is there anything that people need to look out for in terms of recharge? Have those cars gone through a lot of their recharge cycles, so to speak, that you know of, Bryce? Is there anything people need to think about? Or
A key point with batteries is they generally lose between 0.5% and 1% capacity a year. So they're actually lasting a lot longer than people expected. So if you bought a car with, say, 500 kilometres today, in 10 years' time, you'll have lost between 25 and 50 kilometres. And that's generally applicable to all the EVs going back, not counting the Nissan Leaf, the original Nissan Leafs.
fantastic.
So that's true with my experience too. Sorry, Jess. We have a 2012 Nissan Leaf, and when it was new, it only had a maximum range of 160 kilometres. And so we say today it really only goes about 100 kilometres now, but that's still 60% of what it originally did. And I think the main thing is they age gracefully. They don't suddenly die. So even though they do decrease slowly in their capacity, it's at a predictable level. It's not the suddenly your cam belt goes, or suddenly your head gasket gets a crack in it, and the car is worthless. So
and the Leafs
the Leafs were very well built. They were sort of the beginning of mass-produced full BEVs, and they're actually selling for, I'm not trying to market them or anything, but they're now around about $6,000 or $7,000 for a Nissan Leaf from 2012. That, yes, it might only go 90 or 100 kilometres, but if you just want to go to the shops and you plug it back in at home, our Nissan Leaf, we literally have not needed to service it for 4 years. All we have to do is get new tyres, and they just run out. They wear out the same way any other car would. Sorry, Bryce.
Yeah, I might dive into that. Most of the Nissan Leafs don't still have 190 Ks. They're down. The key point is they have if you look into the article in Renew, it actually talks a lot about the Leaf. There's an app you can get to check the battery health, Leaf Spy. And 12 bars around the outside. There's two sort of lots of bars. One's fully charged, it shows 12 bars. And then there's around the edges another ring of 12 bars. originally, and then they slowly lose bars as the capacity for the capacity bars. Most of them are getting down to about 6 or 7 now. So you must have about 8 or 9 or 10 left.
No, it's got about seven
Yes,
of
because
those bars. So
at
it's
around 5, 6, 7.
57% of the original capacity,
so,
according to
that would have.
So we should
most of
probably
them
just
now about
clarify
30
for
to
everyone,
40
Bryce. We should just probably clarify for everyone that the Nissan Leaf's are sort of an exception. Like all the subsequent EVs, the batteries are lasting
much better,
much longer, and really exceeding the expectations. In terms of
it doesn't have the Leaf doesn't have an active thermal management system, so that's where it differs from EVs today. It's just basically air cooled, and it reduces the power to the engine, to the motor rather, if it senses that the battery is getting too hot. But like Bryce says, there's virtually no record of Nissan Leafs catching fire. It's just that if they get a bit too hot, then they degrade in their capacity a bit sooner.
Yeah, so that Nissan Leaf was the exception. Everything else has an active cooling system and keeps the temperatures. So that's why they're lasting so well. That's why I made that exception for the Leaf.
And just in terms of behavior, most of us live in a world where there's something that we plug in most afternoons or at the end of each working day, and it's just a normal part of life now. And the idea that our vehicles can be part of that normal cycle of recharge is not a major change to anyone's lifestyle, I don't think. But we've hit 8:30, so I am just going to share the. Now, let me get this right. Hang on. I have to work out which one I have to share. One. I'm going to do desktop 1, and that should be. Is that the slide? Have I got the slide up? The thank you slide. Great.
Yep.
Thank you to Bryce Gaton, to our panelists, Ian Kilpatrick and Ian Colbard, Ned Kilpatrick and Natalie Bucknell. Thank you to Nillumbik Shire Council, to Clean Energy Nillumbik, of course, and to Renew, to all the participants who have been here tonight. And thank you very much. We will make sure that we send you the link for this recording of the EV webinar. And at that stage, I am going to say thank you so much for joining us. And I'll stop sharing and I'll wave bye-bye to everyone. Thank you so much.